Boston shimmered below our glass balcony like liquid gold poured across the harbor. Inside the penthouse, laughter bounced against marble and glass too polished to sound real. 6 of Julian's friends filled the dining room, men who smelled of wealth and whiskey, women who'd perfected the art of smiling at the wrong jokes. Julian, my husband, stood at the head of the table in his navy tuxedo, bow tie loosened just enough to look effortless. He raised his glass, the city's lights flickering in the reflection. "Let's be honest," he said, his voice smooth as the Cabernet he was drinking. "This sham of a marriage won't survive another year. She's nowhere near my level." For a second. No one breathed. Then came the laughter, too sharp, too eager. Forks clinked, someone actually whistled, across the table. His best friend Daniel shook his head, grinning, pretending it was just a joke. I sat very still. My pulse didn't change. It never does, not in meetings, not in mergers, and certainly not in public humiliation dressed as humor. The candlelight turned my wine the color of blood, and in its reflection, I could see my face calm, unreadable. Julian's hand brushed my shoulder as if to soften the blow. "Come on, darling," he said. "Don't look so serious." "Everyone knows I'm teasing. Do they?" I asked quietly. The laughter dimmed just enough for my voice to slip through it. I reached for my leather folder beside my plate, the one my assistant had couriered from the law office that afternoon. I pulled out a crisp document creamstock, blue ribboned edges, the faint scent of toner still clinging to it. A revised prenuptial agreement, updated per his lawyer's request. I slid it across the table until it rested beside his wine glass. "Then why wait a year?" I said softly. "Let's end it tonight." The sound of silverware stopped. The only movement came from the candle flame trembling in the draft between us. Julian blinked. "What? It's the updated prenup," I said, folding my hands neatly on the table. "Since you're so confident our marriage has an expiration date, I thought we might be efficient." One of the wives, Chloe, let out a nervous laugh. "Ava, you're joking, right?" I smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "I don't joke about paperwork? Ask my clients." Julian tried to laugh again, but his voice cracked on the way out. "Sweetheart, you're being dramatic. Everyone's drinking." I leaned back, marble smooth, letting the silence do the work. "You said I'm not on your level. I'm just putting that in writing." The room's warmth evaporated. Daniel's grin faltered. Across from me, Mark, the loudest of them, cleared his throat and suddenly found his glass fascinating. Even the waiter hovering by the doorway froze, caught between professional discretion and the instinct to flee. Julian reached for the paper, flipping it open. The rustle of the page sounded loud enough to fill the room. "You actually brought this?" "It arrived this afternoon," I said. "I wasn't sure whether to sign it. I suppose now I am." He skimmed the first few lines, eyes narrowing when he reached the new clause, one that stripped him of future claims to my company. His jaw tightened. "This is absurd," he muttered. "You don't even understand half of this legal jargon." "I wrote it," I said evenly. "Remember financial consultant? Harvard law minor?" Someone's fork clattered against porcelain. Julian looked around the table for backup, for laughter, for anyone to rescue him from the silence. No one spoke. I stood, smoothing the silk of my navy dress, every gesture deliberate. "Dinner was wonderful. Please, enjoy dessert." "Ava," he said, voice low, warning threaded through it. "Yes." "Dear, we have guests." "Then you might want to entertain them," I said. Turning toward the door, "They came to watch you perform." The waiter was already waiting with my coat, the kind of silent grace that only comes from witnessing too many broken evenings like this. I slipped it on without looking back. Julian called after me, "You're walking out over a joke?" I paused at the threshold, half turned, the city's reflection cutting across his face like glass. "You're right," I said. "Our marriage was a joke. You just finally told the punchline." And then I left. The elevator doors sealed the whispers behind me. My phone buzzed one message from Daniel Hale. "You should know what he's planning. What exactly does he know that I don't? If the person you loved humiliated you in front of everyone, Would you walk away or make them regret ever underestimating you? Comment prenup if you're ready to see how Ava turns the tables next. Morning light in Boston has a particular kind of arrogance, clear, cold, and expensive. It sliced through this penthouse windows the next day, falling across the city like a spotlight that refused to move. The place looked like a magazine spread, every corner curated, every object whispering success in its own polished accent. To anyone who saw us from the outside, Julian and Ava Sterling were flawless. He, 37, with that golden boy face that photographs loved and a handshake that could sell anything. I, 34, a specialist in financial strategy, prenups, and estate planning for Boston's elite, the kind of work that made people uncomfortable because it required them to imagine endings. Together, we were Boston's golden couple. As the Lifestyle magazine had called us on our wedding week, there was even a spread his tuxedo, my Dior gown, the harbor behind us glowing like we owned the weather. The truth was less photogenic. I'd met Julian at a fundraising gala 6 years ago, one of those nights when money and charm waltz in the same suit. He wasn't from this world. He'd grown up in a narrow house in Worcester, son of a mechanic, full of ambition and soft resentment. I'd found his hunger intoxicating at first. He made me feel like we were partners storming the gates of something, for a while. But success has a way of rearranging the furniture of a marriage. The more I built, the smaller he felt. The more he tried to outshine, the more transparent the effort became. Our penthouse, 42 stories above the harbor, was his proudest purchase and my least favorite place. The penthouse was a hall of mirrors, beautiful, exhausting, and never truly private. Sometimes I thought of it as a snow globe, perfect from the outside, suffocating once you realized you couldn't breathe inside it. Julian loved to perform there. Dinner parties with tech investors, charity brunches with real estate wives, late-night wine tastings with friends who mattered. He would open the curtains wide so the skyline became his audience, as if the city itself applauded his ascent. I'd learned to play my part too, the composed strategist, smiling at the right moments, filling silences with small talk about market trends and trust structures, the perfect accessory to his brand. But inside that choreography, there was a fault line no one saw. Julian's charm came from insecurity. He wore confidence like a borrowed coat, always checking if it still fit. He hated that my clients trusted me with numbers bigger than his company's annual revenue. He hated that I was invited to panels, that my name appeared in Forbes for financial commentary, that people introduced him as Ava Sterling's husband. At first, he tried to compete. Then, he tried to control. Subtle things insisting his team handle my firm's IT for efficiency, reviewing my speeches before events to align our messaging, hinting that I should take a step back for balance. The word balance became a knife he could hide behind. I wasn't alone in noticing. Sophie, my closest friend since grad school sharp. Divorced twice. Now a divorce lawyer who'd turned her scars into currency had warned me months ago. Men like Julian don't fall out of love, she said over cocktails one night. They fall out of superiority, and they'll do anything to climb back up. I should have listened, but denial is the most expensive comfort. I laughed it off then. The way people laugh when they sense a truth they're not ready to face. Then there was Ellen, head of HR at Julian's firm, a woman who understood corporate manipulation better than any textbook. She'd once pulled me aside at a charity luncheon, lowering her voice like a nurse delivering a prognosis. "He's restructuring departments quietly," she said, "and he's using your name to impress investors. Says you'll consult on the next round of funding. Be careful whose signatures appear on what." I'd thanked her, smiled, and gone back to pretending everything was fine. And then, of course, there was Daniel Hale, Julian's best friend since college, the man whose message had landed in my inbox last night like a live wire. You should know what he's planning. Daniel was the kind of man who moved through the world as if gravity worked differently for him, calm, deliberate, always half in the background. He'd been Julian's witness at our wedding, the quiet voice that steadied him when he drank too much or bragged too loudly. I trusted him because Julian did, and because Daniel never seemed to want anything from us. Now, his message sat on my phone like a door left ajar. You should know what he's planning. Planning what? The prenup, the company, me. The irony of it all didn't escape me. I'd spent a decade protecting other women's assets, building clauses and trusts to save them from precisely the kind of man I'd married. My whole career was about foreseeing betrayal before it arrived, except my own. The city's hum outside turned into the steady beat of rain against the windows. It made everything shimmer, like the world was applauding a secret I hadn't caught up to yet. Julian emerged from the bedroom, towel around his neck, phone glued to his hand. "You left last night before dessert," he said lightly, as if we were discussing a misplaced napkin. "Daniel told me you stormed out. Everyone's worried you'll make this awkward." "Did I asked. "Pouring coffee." "Make it awkward or make it true." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're overreacting." "Ava, you always have to win the argument, even when there isn't one." "That must be exhausting for you," I said. He hesitated, measuring whether to push. Then he leaned against the counter, lowering his voice to a silky warning. "We have an image to maintain. People see us as aspirational. Don't ruin that with your moods." Our image, the phrase hung in the air, sterile as the marble countertop between us. I realized then that for Julian, the marriage itself had become a brand, something to manage, to polish, to sell. He kissed my cheek before leaving for the office, the gesture practiced. Hollow. The elevator swallowed him, and I was alone with the city again. From where I stood, the skyline looked like a glass kingdom, glittering and fragile. I pressed my palm against the window. Outside. People probably thought we had everything: the penthouse, the clothes, the perfect marriage, smiling from magazine pages. Inside. I could feel the foundation shifting, and somewhere between the ticking of the rain and the hum of the espresso machine, I remembered Daniel's message waiting unopened in my inbox. "You should know what he's planning." The cursor blinked on the screen like a pulse. I hovered over it, then whispered to the empty room. "All right, Daniel, let's see what you think I need to know." I clicked. By mid-October, the rhythms of our marriage had started to sound offbeat, like a metronome someone had nudged out of sync. Small things first. Julian's phone never left his pocket anymore. He turned its screen down at dinner, laughed a second too late at my questions, and began saying "we less and I more." It was a Thursday when I noticed the first numbers that didn't make sense. I was balancing our quarterly budget, a habit, not a necessity, when the shared savings account flashed a withdrawal I hadn't authorized. $800 consulting fee, a vague label. Too clean, too professional. A few lines below, $12,000 marketing advisory. Another 2 days later, $5,200 strategic retainer. None of it connected to his firm's vendors, and all of it reeked of someone trying to look legitimate. When you manage estates for billionaires, you learn what guilt looks like on a balance sheet. It hides behind euphemisms. Consulting is a favorite. Julian came into the study that evening, jacket slung over his shoulder, smelling faintly of a citrus cologne I didn't own. He leaned against the doorframe, casual, his grin set to default charm. "Working again." "Reviewing our accounts," I said, not looking up. "You've been authorizing a lot of consulting lately," he chuckled, pouring himself bourbon. "You know how startups are. Everybody's a consultant." I tapped the screen. "From our personal savings." He shrugged. "Temporary transfers. Daniel's setting up a new subsidiary, something big. You'll love it when it's official." I watched the amber swirl in his glass. He always lied better when he had something to hold. "What's the company called?" He smiled over the rim. "Trade secret?" Then he kissed the top of my head, left the room, and never asked why the screen of my laptop had gone dark the moment he entered. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain lashed against the glass walls, and the city below looked like a circuit board, lit windows, dark alleys, people moving through patterns they didn't understand. I reached for my phone, opened my private ledger app, the one I use for confidential client notes, and created a new file. Titled Discrepancies, J. Sterling. By morning. There were 12 entries. At noon. Ellen called. Her voice had that steady HR tone, low, deliberate, as if she were recording every word. "Ava, it's Ellen from Sterling Capital. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all," I lied, staring at the folder labeled consulting fees. "I thought you should know Julian submitted some documents to the board this week. He's petitioning to adjust equity allocation. It includes a statement suggesting you're not financially stable enough to hold majority control." My grip on the phone tightened. "Excuse me," he framed it as a precaution. "Risk mitigation?" Due to your workload and stress levels. It sounded off. So I'm asking privately, are you aware of this? I am now, I said. Ellen exhaled softly, professional empathy slipping through her voice. Watch the filings. He's building a paper trail, after the call. I sat perfectly still for a full minute. The city outside felt miles away, but the hum of traffic matched my heartbeat fast, relentless. Julian wasn't just lying, he was structuring a lie, crafting a legal fiction where I became the liability. That kind of move wasn't impulsive, it was strategic. When he came home that evening, it was nearly 10. He smelled like polished wood and foreign perfume notes of sandalwood, something floral beneath. He hung his coat, loosened his tie, walked straight to the bar. Tough meeting, I asked from the couch. Investor dinner. He poured whiskey without looking at me, ran late. Who's the investor? A simple answer. Practiced. The lie slid across the room like smoke. I watched the city lights flicker on the glass behind him. Next time. Call. I might save you a seat. He chuckled, checked his phone. You hate those events. You're right, I said, but I like to see what level I'm not at. He froze mid-scroll. For a second, something sharp flickered in his eyes, then smoothed away. Don't start this again. Ava. Last night was awkward enough. I smiled. Slow. Deliberate. I didn't start anything. Julian? You did. He walked past me, heading down the hall. I have an early flight tomorrow, he said over his shoulder. We'll talk when I'm back. When the bedroom door shut, I opened my laptop. One by one. I pulled the statements from every joint account, cross-referencing them against corporate transfers and his personal cards. Each anomaly I labeled, time-stamped, encrypted. Then I uploaded the data to a private drive I created under a shell email sterlingreview.protonmail.com, the same kind of blind account my wealth management clients used when they didn't want paper trails traced back. I added passwords. Double authentication. Offline copies to an external drive disguised as a perfume box in my closet. Years of advising others on asset protection had taught me one truth. Evidence only matters if you survive to present it. The clock on the mantel read 2:14 a.m. The city was asleep, but the building still hummed the mechanical pulse of the elevator. The whisper of HVAC through vents, somewhere below. A taxi honked, long and lonely. I scrolled through Julian's transactions one last time before shutting the screen. There, buried among the withdrawals, was a transfer I'd missed earlier, $48,000 wired to Jace Niches. Holdings LLC. The note field read simply, consulting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Jace S. Holdings. His initials. The lie wasn't just a side project, it had a name. I sat back, the glass walls reflecting me from every angle. The city looked like a spreadsheet, every window a number, every secret in balance. Julian thought he was building a new empire. What he didn't realize was that I'd already opened the first exhibit in the case against him. I clicked save, closed the laptop, and whispered to the city, let's see who consults who. Rain had washed the city clean by morning, but inside the penthouse the air felt static, charged like the pause before a circuit blows. Julian was already gone, leaving behind his half-finished espresso and a faint trail of cologne that didn't belong to our bedroom. I stood by the marble counter, staring at the untouched cup until it went cold. He'd taken his laptop. Again. But his iCloud was still synced to our shared family desktop in the study, an oversight he must have forgotten when he started hiding things. I hadn't planned to check, but temptation is quiet, and I clicked. When the screen flickered awake, his inbox blinked open automatically. Routine updates, company spam, a few forwarded articles he'd probably never read, then, buried between drafts of dinner invites and investor follow-up memos. One line froze me. Subject prenup. Revised draft final version. The timestamp read, 2:47 a.m. 3 nights ago. I clicked. Inside was a neatly formatted legal document addressed to D. Pollard. Eska. A name I didn't recognize. The message body was brief. Detached. The tone of someone already rehearsing betrayal. Derek. Please review this version for filing readiness. Remove Ava's legal counsel from the CC chain She won't need to see this until execution. J.S. The attachment loaded, and my name sat at the top, cold and deliberate as if I'd been written out of my own story. Ava R. Sterling, Party B. My own signature block sat at the bottom blank. I scrolled through, each clause colder than the last. Paragraph 6 stopped me in the event of marital dissolution. Ava Sterling waives any claim to Sterling Financial Holdings, LLC, its subsidiaries, client lists, or intellectual property therein, Sterling Financial Holdings. That was my company, the firm I'd built before Julian ever stepped into my life. The name had been changed after marriage to reflect our partnership, but the corporate ownership had always remained mine. Until now. He'd been rewriting our history on paper, quietly, legally. I opened the attachments folder, pulse steady, the way it gets before a deposition. Another file. Investor Chia's contacts transfer. PDF outlined a list of high-value names, names from my client roster, notes beside each one. Potential investor. Approach under Sterling Capital branding. Mentioned shared network via Ava. He wasn't just planning to take my company, he was stealing my clients, moving them under a shadow entity that wore our initials like camouflage. And then I saw the CC line on the email, CC Daniel Hale, for a moment. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Daniel Julian's best friend, the one who texted me. You should know what he's planning. So what was he? An ally or a lookout? I scrolled further down. And there it was, Daniel's brief reply. Time-stamped 5 minutes later. Received. You're pushing this fast. Julian, are you sure you want to loop me in on this? Julian's response came seconds after you're my witness if she claims ignorance later. It's just business. Just business. The words landed like glass breaking in my chest clean. Precise. Final. I forwarded the entire chain to my encrypted drive under the alias I'd set up days ago. I also saved the attachments to a USB disguised as a silver pen, a habit I'd developed for clients who needed unofficial storage. My work had always revolved around protecting people from deception. I never thought I'd need to use the same tools on my own husband. A knock at the door startled me. The intercom crackled Ellen from Julian's company, her voice tense. Ava, I only have a minute. Can we talk? I buzzed her up. She arrived in a trench coat, hair damp from the rain, eyes darting toward the hallway like someone used to being overheard. I poured coffee. She didn't touch it. Julian filed preliminary paperwork this morning. She said, it's not public yet, but he's listing Sterling Financial Holdings as a subsidiary of Sterling Capital Partners. That company didn't exist 2 weeks ago. He's moving assets. Accounts. And she hesitated. Client data. Some of your contacts. Do you have proof? Not yet. But I saw the email header from his sent folder. Daniel was CC'd. I handed her the printout I just made. Proof enough. Ellen skimmed a page, her face tightening. He's forging a separation before filing for one, building the narrative first. Classic strategy: make the wife look unstable, make the company look shared, then take both. I exhaled slowly. He won't get that far. Ellen looked up, studying me. You always sound like a lawyer when you're angry. I design legal weapons for a living. I said, he's just handed me one. She smiled grimly. Good. Because from what I hear, he's been briefing the board that you're emotionally volatile and financially reckless. He's positioning himself as the savior of the brand. The irony tasted bitter on my tongue. A savior who can't read a balance sheet. Ellen slipped the printout into her bag. I'll keep watching from inside. But Ava, be careful. He's playing for keeps. After she left, the apartment felt too quiet. The city's hum seeped through the glass, faint and constant. I turned back to Julian's email one last time, rereading that line. In the event of divorce, Ava waives any claim. He'd written it like a prophecy, a self-fulfilling clause. I closed the laptop and stared out at the skyline. The clouds had started gathering again, thick and gray, the kind that blurred everything until you couldn't tell where the city ended and the ocean began. Julian thought the paperwork made him untouchable, but paper cuts both ways. I picked up my phone, opened my encrypted messenger, and typed a short message to the one person whose motives I still couldn't read. To Daniel Hale. Message: I saw your name on an email today. We need to talk. Privately. The typing dots appeared, blinked, then vanished. No reply. I locked my screen, slid the pen drive into my purse, and whispered to the empty room, "Let's see whose signature bleeds first." The next morning, I drove through the drizzle to Sophie's office on Beacon Street, a converted brownstone that smelled faintly of ink and burnt espresso. The brass plaque by the door read, S. Harlow and Associates Family Law. Inside. The floors creaked with history and warning. Sophie had built her practice on the ashes of 3 high-profile divorces, her own included, and carried herself like someone who'd already seen every possible brand of betrayal. She was waiting, coffee in hand, eyes sharp enough to cut through pretense. "You look like a woman who hasn't slept since discovering she married a thief," she said, not as an insult, but as a diagnosis. "Thief and strategist," I corrected, dropping the printed emails on her desk. "He's restructuring my company under his own name. He's already talking to investors." Sophie flipped through the papers, her eyes moving quickly, the corner of her mouth tightening. "He's building a mirror company. Classic misdirection. Same brand elements, same client overlap. It'll look legitimate until someone examines the filings. That's what I'm doing now," I said, examining everything. She leaned back in her chair. "You know the law as well as I do. If you confront him now, he'll bury the evidence before you can get a court order." "So what do you suggest?" Sophie's eyes narrowed with calculation. "You let him believe he's winning? We file quietly for a temporary asset freeze justified under suspicion of marital fraud. It'll stop him from moving shared funds without alerting him immediately. When the court notice hits, he'll already be trapped." I hesitated. "And if he's already moved the money, then we follow the trail. But first, we need bait." She slid a blank folder across the desk, sent him a version of the prenup with intentional errors subtle enough to pass at first glance, obvious enough for a real lawyer to correct. "Misspell your middle initial. Use the wrong company Ian. Add a false clause referencing an escrow account that doesn't exist. Then wait to see who fixes it. Whoever does has access to his legal team. You want me to set a trap?" Sophie smiled faintly. "I want you to act like the woman he thinks he's outsmarting. Play naive. Let him deliver the evidence himself." That night. The penthouse glowed cold and metallic. Julian was still out some networking dinner, so I sat at the dining table where this whole charade began. I opened my laptop and pulled up the prenup draft he'd tried to conceal. Then I built its twin. In my version. Ava R. Sterling became Ava L. Sterling. One digit in the corporate tax ID changed. A non-existent escrow account was mentioned in Section 12. To anyone skimming, it looked legitimate. To a trained eye, it was bait. I attached the file to an email. Subject line: "Updated per your lawyer's last request." My tone was calm, deferential, the kind of language that fed his ego. I scheduled it for 6 just before he checked his inbox with coffee, before the mask of competence fully settled on his face. Then I sat back and waited. By Friday afternoon, Sophie called. Her voice was low, controlled the tone she used in court. It worked. She said, "I closed my office door. Who bit Julian's attorney Pollard forwarded a version of your fake prenup to me this morning, requesting a review for alignment. He claimed your side had submitted it last night." I smiled, slow. And how would Pollard have gotten it if I only sent it to Julian exactly? I checked the metadata. It was first opened from Daniel Hale's IP address. He transferred it to Julian's counsel at 11:43 p.m. last night. For a moment, I didn't speak. The words didn't surprise me, they confirmed what I'd already feared, but hearing them still made my chest tighten. "Daniel, the man who'd texted you should know what he's planning. The man who'd sat across my table for years pretending to be a friend." Sophie broke the silence. "You need to understand what this means. He's not just an accessory. He's facilitating the fraud. That makes him legally complicit." I turned toward the window, the skyline glinting like broken glass. "He's Julian's courier, the hand that stays clean." "Then we make sure every transfer has a mirror," she said. "Every document he touches. You duplicate. Every email you capture. We build the case one breadcrumb at a time." That night, I poured myself a glass of white wine and opened my encrypted drive. Every folder I'd created: discrepancies, transfers, Emails was now joined by a new one. The Mirror Company. Inside it. I saved screenshots of the email chain Sophie forwarded, complete with timestamps and routing details. Pollard, Daniel, Julian. Each arrow a betrayal, neat as geometry. Julian came home past midnight, humming as he hung his coat. I kept my laptop half shut, the glow hidden. Long day, I asked. Productive, he said, loosening his cufflinks. We're expanding faster than expected. We, I repeated softly. Who's we? Julian, he smiled. Investors. You'll meet them soon. I let my gaze linger just long enough to make him wonder what I knew, then looked away. I'm sure they'll be enlightening. When he disappeared into the bedroom, I finished the last of my wine, savoring the metallic aftertaste. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a court confirmation temporary asset freeze approved, confidential notification pending. The message was short, clinical, and beautiful. In 48 hours, every joint account, company-linked transfer, and shared investment would be locked until further review. He wouldn't know until he tried to move money again. He thought he was building a reflection of me, a company that mirrored mine, a world where he was the architect. What he didn't realize was that mirrors can also blind. I looked out at the city waking under pale light, cars threading through wet streets, and whispered into the quiet glass, "You wanted a level playing field. Julian, let's see how you handle zero gravity." The bar was dim. Tucked beneath a boutique hotel on Newbury Street, the kind of place where secrets came dressed as business meetings. It smelled faintly of bourbon, cedar, and the kind of silence people paid extra for. Daniel was already there. Sitting in the back booth beneath a brass sconce that threw half his face into shadow, he looked nothing like the smooth strategist who used to sit across from Julian at fundraisers, polishing his cufflinks while my husband held court. Tonight, he looked tired, older, guilty. "Ava," he said when I approached, his voice low. "Thanks for coming." "I wasn't sure I should," I replied, sliding into the booth across from him. "You've been busy forwarding my private documents to Julian's lawyer." He winced. "You saw that." For a moment. Shame flickered genuine. Not rehearsed, I did. I folded my hands neatly on the table. "So tell me, Daniel, should I thank you for the betrayal, or ask which side you're billing by the hour?" He looked up, meeting my eyes. "Neither." I waited. He leaned forward. "I didn't send that prenup to hurt you. I sent it to trace him. Julian's been building a case against you for months, Ava. He's trying to get you declared financially incompetent, if he succeeds. The court strips you of control over Sterling Financial. He walks away with everything." My breath caught, but only for a second. Financially incompetent, Daniel nodded. "He's been collecting fake documentation emails taken out of context, photos of you working late labeled as mental instability, even an edited recording of you arguing about company budgets. He's presenting it as evidence you're unfit to manage assets." I stared at him. "And you've just been helping him." I was. He admitted quietly. "At first. He told me it was for a contingency plan. Then I realized he was setting you up. So I started forwarding what he sent me to Sophie through that fake prenup. It was the only way to get the trail out without tipping him off." He reached into his jacket and slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a voice memo labeled simply "Thursday night, Harbor Club." I hesitated, then pressed play. Julian's voice spilled through the tiny speaker, smooth and certain, the voice of a man who'd already rewritten history. "Once the prenup's filed, she's out," he said, laughing. "I'll rebrand everything under my name. She won't see it coming. By the time she does, she'll have signed herself out of her own empire in the background." Male laughter echoed his circle of friends, the same ones who toasted him that humiliating night. The recording ended. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The jazz from the bar's stereo seemed suddenly too loud, too alive. Daniel exhaled. "I've been recording him for weeks. I have more emails, text chains, meeting transcripts. Enough to prove conspiracy and fraud." I looked at him carefully. "Why are you telling me this now? Because he's planning to file the competency motion next week. If that goes through, you'll be locked out of your own accounts before you even see the summons." I studied him, the twitch in his jaw. the exhaustion behind his eyes. And what's your role in all this? Daniel, repentant witness, double agent, or just a man who finally realized the cost of silence? He gave a dry laugh. Maybe all three. Why help me? Because I helped him first, he said simply, and I need to make it right. I leaned back. Processing? The logical part of me cataloged every fact a voice memo, a witness, a timeline. The emotional part wanted to throw the drink in his face, but anger was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. Does Julian know you've turned? I asked. Not yet. He still thinks I'm feeding him intel from inside your firm. He trusts me. Good, I said. Let's keep it that way. Daniel blinked. You're not walking away, no, I said, my tone calm. Clinical the way I spoke when drafting clauses that decided fortunes. We're going to make it legal. Everything he's done. Every lie he's written into a contract will bring it into daylight. He frowned. You're talking about litigation? I'm talking about exposure. I replayed Julian's laugh, memorizing its arrogance. If he wants this to be a paper war, then fine. I'll make sure every page bleeds his signature. Daniel nodded slowly. I can testify, but you'll need more than that. I will, I said. Bank records, communication logs, internal memos. I need to show a pattern intent. Coordination, motive. He hesitated. That'll take time. Then start tonight. I slid a business card from my clutch black, embossed with silver letters SES, Harlow and Associates. Sophie's expecting your call. You'll send everything to her. She'll handle the filings under seal. He looked at the card, then at me. He'll come after me when he finds out. He'll come after both of us, I said. The difference is you still have a way out. Daniel looked down at his drink, the ice melting into diluted amber. You know, I used to envy him, he murmured. The life you two had, the penthouse, the reputation. Now it just looks hollow. Glass always does, I said quietly, for a long while. We sat in silence. The rain outside had softened into mist, streaking the windows with silver. A waiter approached. I waved him off. My pulse had steadied again, the way it always did when something shifted from chaos into strategy. When Daniel finally stood, he extended his hand. For what it's worth. Ava. I'm sorry. I shook it. Don't be sorry. Be useful. He managed a faint smile and disappeared into the rain. I stayed behind. The bar's dim light flickering across my reflection in the window, two versions of my overlapping the wife who once believed in love, and the strategist who finally understood leverage. Julian had built his entire plan on confidence on the assumption that I'd never fight him on his own battlefield. But I'd drafted stronger clauses than he'd ever read. I finished my drink, pulled out my phone, and opened my encrypted folder labeled Mirror Company beneath it. I created a new subfolder, The Case. Then, I uploaded Daniel's recording. If Julian wanted war, he'd get it in signatures, timestamps, and court seals. Let's make it legal, I whispered. And this time, I didn't mean marriage. Boston spring had arrived late that year, gilding the city in cold light. The evening of the Harrington Foundation Charity Gala shimmered with precision, the kind of event where cameras caught every smile and champagne glass sparkled like a lie polished to perfection. Inside the ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, gold chandeliers hung low over tables draped in ivory silk. The city's elite gathered in sequined gowns and tailored tuxedos, murmuring about markets, philanthropy, and who was sitting next to whom. And there, in the center of it all, stood Julian Sterling, charismatic, immaculate, and entirely convinced that the night belonged to him. He looked at home beneath the chandeliers, shaking hands with donors, laughing too loudly, his polished cufflinks glinting as he gestured toward the stage. The placard beside the podium read, "The Harrington Fund for Future Innovators, presented by Sterling Capital Partners and Sterling Financial." He'd merged my name with his again, as if ownership could be rewritten by invitation font. I stood near the bar, glass of champagne untouched, in a tailored midnight suit that shimmered with silver threads. I'd chosen it intentionally power disguised as elegance. From this distance. I could see him, but he couldn't yet see me. 1 month of quiet preparation had led here. Sophie had coordinated the filings. Daniel had secured the chain of evidence, and Ellen had confirmed the transfers from within Julian's company. Every move was documented, time-stamped, certified. Tonight wasn't just theater, it was testimony. A hush rippled through the crowd as the orchestra faded and the host stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Julian Sterling. Applause erupted, soft and elegant like falling snow. Julian strode onto the stage with the ease of a man who believed applause was his birthright. He smiled, pausing for effect. When my wife and I first built Sterling Financial, we believed in legacy about creating something that lasts. He gestured toward the audience, where half the city's board members sat nodding. He continued, voice warm, polished, utterly false. In a world where so many people chase temporary success, Ava and I have built something permanent. Our bond, our company, our future. A murmur of admiration moved through the room. He was radiant under the lights, rehearsed sincerity in human form. And then, behind him. The LED screen flickered. A faint crackle of audio filled the ballroom. At first, people assumed it was a glitch. Then came his voice familiar, casual, devastatingly clear. Once the prenups filed. She's out. I'll rebrand everything under my name. She won't see it coming. A beat of silence. Then another voice, one of his friends, laughed faintly in the background. Julian, you're ruthless, just strategic. Julian replied in the recording. The audience froze. Heads turned toward the screen. Waiters paused mid-step. Julian's face drained of color. This isn't part of the program, he stammered, glancing off stage toward the tech crew, but the video continued overlaying the audio with a scrolling image of legal documents, the forged prenup, the metadata logs, the signatures with mismatched timestamps. The title across the top read, Sterling Capital Forgery, submitted March 12th. And beneath it, another line. Projected in bold white letters, Exhibit A, evidence filed under seal, Suffolk County Court. The room erupted in whispers. That was my cue. I walked from the back of the room, heels clicking against marble, the sound sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. Cameras turned instinctively, even before I reached the stage. Every eye was on me. Julian's voice faltered at the microphone. Ava. What are you doing? I climbed the last step, standing beside him beneath the spotlight. My hands were steady as I lifted the black leather portfolio I'd carried all night. This, I said, my voice calm, measured, carrying through the room, is the original prenup I wrote, the one filed and notarized 5 years ago. I opened the folder and held it up. Pages neat, signatures crisp. Then, from the other side, I withdrew a second stack identical, but not quite. And this, I said, letting the second file catch the light, is the forgery Julian filed with his lawyer, the one with the wrong date, the altered initials, and the fake escrow clause. A murmur rolled across the room like thunder. Cameras flashed. I turned slightly toward the crowd, then read aloud from the final page. Clause 14, forgery or misrepresentation by either party voids all spousal claims, including rights to shared assets and future earnings. I closed the folder gently, the soft click of the clasp louder than applause. Then I looked at Julian. So, to put it plainly, by attempting to falsify this document, you just voided your own claim to my company, our home, and every shared account you've touched. A silence fell so complete that even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Then came the whispering sharp, shocked, contagious. From the VIP tables, I saw faces shifting, investors pulling out their phones, donors exchanging looks. One of the foundation directors leaning toward the event coordinator with a grim expression. Someone muttered, he forged his own prenup. Another voice hissed, that's fraud on record. Julian tried to speak, his face pale under the gold lights. Ava, we can talk about this privately. But the host had already stepped forward, microphone trembling in his hand. I think we'll take a brief intermission. Behind him. I could see the event manager gesturing discreetly toward the exit, whispering to the sponsors, one by one. Donors began to stand. A ripple of discomfort spread through the crowd as the illusion cracked. Julian stood frozen, hands at his sides, mouth opening and closing without words. I leaned in, voice low enough for only him to hear. You wanted the spotlight. Darling, I just made sure it was honest. Then I stepped down from the stage as I reached the ballroom doors. Sophie was waiting in the corner, expression unreadable. She handed me her phone already buzzing with notifications. Local press picked up the video. She whispered, "It's everywhere, behind us." I heard the orchestra falter, the low buzz of panic. Julian's empire, the one he built on deceit and borrowed charm, was crumbling in real time under crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, and all I needed to destroy it was paper and proof. I turned to Sophie, my voice steady. "Now we move to phase 2. She nodded. "The legal filings." "No," I said, eyes on the ballroom behind me where his legacy was collapsing. The aftermath. The night after the gala. Boston seemed unnaturally quiet. The city lights shimmered off the Charles River like a reflection of everything I'd just burned down. The air still carried whispers from the ballroom, my name in headlines. Julian's reputation dissolving across 100 dinner conversations, but spectacle was only the beginning. When dawn broke. I was already in Sophie's office. She looked composed, hair perfectly smooth, eyes red from working through the night. On her desk lay a thick manila folder embossed with the state seal. "We're filing on 2 counts," she said. "Forgery of a legal document and attempted misappropriation of marital assets. Both under Massachusetts statute. This isn't a divorce anymore. Ava, it's corporate fraud." I nodded. "Steady. File it today." She slid the papers toward me. "Sign here and here. This authorizes us to move for an asset freeze order. If the judge approves, Julian won't be able to touch a cent joint accounts, investment portfolios, business funds, nothing. Everything locks within 48 hours. My pen didn't tremble as I signed. He wanted control. I said quietly, "Let's give him none." By noon, Sophie had filed the petition electronically. The clerk's confirmation pinged on her phone like a bullet casing hitting marble. At 2:37 p.m., Judge Porter's order came through. Temporary asset freeze approved. Effective immediately. It was official. Julian's empire, his mirrored company, his illusion of power frozen in place like insects in amber. That evening, I drafted the next letter myself. Calm, clinical, lethal. Subject: notice of pending legal action. Sterling Capital Partners. Dear partners and affiliates. Notice all financial dealings under Sterling Capital Partners are under investigation. Suspend all transfers pending review. Effective immediately. Please suspend all transfers, new investments, and pending contracts until further instruction. Regards. Ava L., Sterling Principal. Sterling Financial, co-founder under review. Sophie reviewed it and smiled faintly. This will hit faster than any injunction. Within an hour. Copies went out to every client, investor, and board member Julian had ever bragged to. I imagined the phones lighting up in his office, the whispered panic spreading through corridors lined with glass. His employees would check their emails, then their balances, and realize nothing moved. By sunset, his silence would be loud enough to hear across the city. At 6 p.m., Daniel arrived at Sophie's office, suit still wrinkled from the previous night. He carried a folder labeled Affidavit of Witness, Daniel Hale. He set it on Sophie's desk without ceremony. Everything's there, dates. Communications? My statement. It confirms Julian knew the prenup was fake when he filed it. Sophie nodded, flipping through the pages. You'll be protected as a cooperating witness. But once this goes public, your name will be tied to his scandal. I can live with that, Daniel said quietly. He nearly destroyed her company. And mine. He turned to me. You were right, Ava. He thought he could rewrite reality because people like him think paper is just paper, but you reminded him it's power. I gave a small nod. Thank you. Daniel, you did the right thing eventually. He managed a weary smile. Better late than never. When he left, Sophie looked at me. You know this will get ugly. The media's circling already. I'm not afraid of ugly, I said, my voice low. Even. I'm afraid of unfinished the next morning. I walked into my office at Sterling Financial for the first time since the gala. The lobby was silent, except for the hum of the espresso machine. My assistant looked up, startled but relieved. "Mrs. Sterling, are we still operating?" "Yes," I said. We're not under investigation." "He is." I handed her a sealed envelope. "Send this to legal and have them transfer my holdings." Inside were the trust papers I'd spent all night drafting. Trust name: the Women in Finance Legacy Fund. Trustee Patricia Howard. Beneficiary: none listed charitable in perpetuity. Every share I owned of the company, of my real estate investments, of the personal portfolio Julian once bragged about, was being moved into the trust, irrevocable, protected by law. Sophie had raised an eyebrow when I told her the plan. "You're giving it all away, not giving." I'd said, "Securing?" "He can't take what I don't technically own by noon." The transfers were complete. In every database, under every registry. Sterling Financial Holdings now belong to something beyond reach, beyond greed, beyond manipulation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Julian had tried to make me powerless instead. I'd made myself untouchable. That evening, the city headlines glowed across my phone screen: Sterling Capital under federal review after forgery claims. Charity gala turns scandal. Boston's power couple implodes. Below each headline, a photo from the gala me standing on stage, papers in hand, Julian behind me, mid-blink, mid-denial. I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to. At 9:13 p.m., a message came through from an unknown number. "You froze everything. I can't access a cent. You ruined me. Ava. J." I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. "Correction. You did that when you forged my signature." Then I powered off my phone and set it on the counter beside a glass of wine. The skyline shimmered through the window cold. Brilliant. Unbothered. The next stage would be slower. Procedural, precise, courtrooms, filings, depositions, the grind of truth through systems built for delay, but I'd waited years in silence already. Patience was my sharpest weapon. Sophie's voice echoed in my head from that morning. "You're not just winning this case. Ava, you're rewriting how it ends for women like you." I looked at the stack of legal copies on my coffee table, the lawsuit, the freeze order, the trust documents, and smiled faintly. He'd spent months plotting to erase me, and I'd spent 1 week turning his world into evidence. The courthouse on Beacon Hill smelled faintly of oak polish and old paper, the scent of battles already fought and won by documents alone. The marble floors carried the echo of shoes and consequence. Outside. A storm gathered, inside. Everything was about to end where it had begun with signatures. Julian was already seated at the plaintiff's table when I entered. His once impeccable navy suit wrinkled at the sleeves, his cufflinks mismatched. The man who used to fill a room now seemed smaller, as though the gravity of truth had finally found him. His lawyer a new one, not Pollard, but someone cheaper, younger. Desperate shuffled through folders with nervous hands. Sophie sat beside me, composed as ever, her tablet open to the evidence slides. "We stay calm. We stay precise." She murmured, "He'll try to turn this emotional. You stay factual. Paper only. Paper only." I repeated. The court clerk called the session to order. Judge Porter, the same one who'd approved the asset freeze, looked down at us over her glasses. Eyes sharp and tired. "Let's begin." Julian's attorney rose first. Voice falsely confident. "Your Honor, my client maintains that the recording presented by the defense is a fabrication edited and spliced to misrepresent his words. He gestured toward me with the dramatic flourish of a man auditioning for sympathy. This entire narrative of forgery rests on a manipulated file." Judge Porter nodded. "You'll have a chance to prove that." "Continue." The attorney pressed a button on the projector. The screen behind him flickered to life, showing a blurred waveform, Julian's voice. "Once the prenup's filed, she's out. I'll rebrand everything under my name." Julian leaned forward. "That's edited. You can tell from the objection," Sophie said evenly. "Speculation? Sustained." The judge looked unimpressed. "Mr. Sterling, you'll have your turn." Sophie stood, walked to the screen, and with one tap replaced their copy with ours. The resolution sharpened not just audio, but metadata overlays glowing in red. Your Honor, she began. The defense would like to present Exhibit B, the unaltered recording. Extracted directly from Mr. Sterling's iPhone backup. Obtained through subpoena? She clicked once more. The timestamp appeared March 30th, 10:47 p.m. Location dates Harbor Club. Boston. Device signature iPhone 13 Pro, registered to Julian A. Sterling. Accompanying this file, she continued, are Apple's server authentication logs, confirming the original upload occurred from the plaintiff's device at the stated time. Server logs confirmed it came from Julian's phone. The evidence was airtight. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Sterling, are you disputing that this is your phone's data? Julian hesitated, eyes darting toward his lawyer. It might be, but I didn't send that file. Sophie smiled slightly, that surgical smile she reserved for the final cut. No, you didn't send it. You bragged about it. She pressed play again. The laughter filled the courtroom. She won't see it coming. Julian's face went gray. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. Enough. For a moment. The room was still except for the rustle of papers and the storm outside pressing against the tall windows. Judge Porter turned to Julian's table. The evidence demonstrates deliberate forgery of a marital contract and an attempt to misappropriate assets held jointly under Sterling Financial Holdings, given the overwhelming proof. This court finds in favor of the defendant, Mrs. Ava L. Sterling. Julian's head dropped into his hands. The judge continued, voice cool and precise. All marital claims filed under the fraudulent document are hereby void. The plaintiff's rights to spousal assets, inheritance, and partnership distributions are revoked. Furthermore, restitution is ordered for funds unlawfully transferred from joint accounts, to be repaid in full within 60 days. Her gavel came down a final time. Court adjourned. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, the reporters restrained until that moment burst into motion, the clicks of cameras blending with the low thunder outside. Headlines would bloom within the hour. Boston financier loses company in forged prenup scandal. Judge rules against Sterling wife outsmarts scheme in courtroom showdown. Julian sat motionless, his lawyer whispering futilely beside him. I stood, adjusted the cuff of my ivory blazer, and turned to leave as I reached the aisle. A reporter called out, Me and Mrs. Marquis. Sterling, do you have any comment on the verdict? I paused, meeting the cluster of microphones with the calm that had carried me through every storm. My voice was low, deliberate, clear enough to cut through the noise. Paper built this marriage, I said. Paper ended it. Then I walked out. Outside. The rain had started fine, steady, relentless. The courthouse steps gleamed under the streetlights, and the storm made the city hum like a living thing. I stood there for a moment, the cold air filling my lungs, the court order in my hand catching a flash of lightning, across the street. The press waited under umbrellas, shouting my name, but I didn't stop. I descended the marble stairs, each step echoing like punctuation at the end of a chapter. She was still there. But she looked different now, sharper, freer, illuminated by the reflection of legal paper that had become her armor. Sophie joined me at the curb, holding out an umbrella. It's over, she said softly. I shook my head. No, it's settled. There's a difference. We shared a quiet smile before walking toward the waiting car. Behind us. The courthouse doors opened, and for one brief moment, I saw Julian standing in the doorway, drenched by the rain, clutching his briefcase like it might still hold the life he'd lost. But I didn't turn back. Some wars aren't won by destruction, they're won by documentation. The thunder rolled again, and I whispered to myself, justice doesn't shout. It signs. 6 months later. The skyline looked different. Or maybe it was just me. The same buildings still glittered across the Charles. The same yachts still glided across the river, but the view no longer felt like a cage. It felt earned. The brass plaque outside my new office read, Sterling Advisory for Women Financial Strategy and Asset Protection. The name gleamed in the morning light. Below it, a single tagline. Your paper, your power. I'd launched the firm 2 months earlier, quietly at first. Just a few clients, women whose partners had quietly signed their futures away. Then came the flood. CEOs, startup founders, trust beneficiaries, all with the same story told in different fonts of grief. Now, the reception was full every morning. The scent of espresso replaced the old tension of my former life. My staff, all women I'd personally trained, worked with precision and warmth. No pretenses, no hidden agendas. That day, the sunlight filtered through the glass walls. Spilling across my desk, a bouquet of pale orchids from Sophie sat beside the monitor. I was reviewing a new client file when a notification pinged on my screen, one unread email. No sender listed. Subject: You still have an ally who regrets everything. Signed, D. I leaned back in my chair for a moment. I said nothing. Then I smiled. Daniel. There was no apology, no explanation. Just those 7 words, enough to tell me that some people, when stripped of the noise, still found their conscience. I moved the cursor and dragged the message into a folder labeled Closed Cases. Closure, after all, doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper, unsigned. That evening, Boston was wrapped in gold. I met Sophie on the rooftop terrace of my building, the one I'd bought under the trust's name, free from any claim or memory of Julian Sterling. The sky stretched endless above us, city lights flickering like quiet applause. Sophie poured 2 glasses of Chablis, her manicure catching the light. To fresh starts, she said. I raised my glass. To clean paper. We drank in silence for a moment, the kind that feels like peace instead of aftermath. You know, she said, setting her glass down, most people in your position would have vanished for a while, moved to California, reinvented themselves. I smiled faintly. I didn't need reinvention. I just needed correction. Sophie studied me. You really don't hate him, do you? I thought about it, the years of erasure, the laughter behind glass doors, the paper trails of deceit, the courtroom flash, the silence afterward. Then I shook my head. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, I said quietly. It's about not letting their noise lower your level. Sophie raised her glass again, the city glinting between us. Level reclaimed. Level reclaimed, I echoed, and we drank to that. Later that night, I stood alone by the railing. The city hummed below. The soft buzz of taxis and summer air. My phone vibrated with another alert, a business magazine headline, Sterling Advisory named Boston's top emerging firm for female entrepreneurs. Underneath, a photo of me smiling faintly, the caption reading, Ava Sterling turned betrayal into blueprint. I closed the screen, exhaled slowly. The wind lifted my hair, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the reflection of my own success. Across town, the fluorescent lights of a parking garage flickered against gray concrete. A figure in a wrinkled suit stood beside a faded sedan, clutching a paper coffee cup with a shaking hand. The cup read, Level None. Julian looked around, as if half expecting someone to recognize him, to remember who he used to be. No one did. He worked as a freelance consultant now, drafting proposals that never landed, pitching to investors who politely declined. The empire of glass had shattered, leaving only fragments dull enough to hold. He took a sip from his cup and stared at the horizon. Where my office tower gleamed faintly in the distance, he didn't know the trust he tried to steal. Now funded scholarships for women in finance at his name erased. And maybe, in some corner of his hollow conscience, he understood the irony. Paper had been his weapon. It became my redemption. The next morning, I unlocked the office early, sunlight spilling across the marble floor. On my desk sat a single folder waiting for my signature. I smiled, uncapped my pen, and signed the engagement letter as he drives away. The camera lingers on the cup still spinning on the concrete floor, the words Level None face upward, illuminated by the flickering light before the scene cuts to black. If you were in Ava's place, would you choose forgiveness, or let the law speak for you?